Good afternoon, everyone. Just before we get started and I do a bit of an introduction, I just want to acknowledge the presence today of Erwin Kotler, the chair of the Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and a former member of this subcommittee and a true hero of human rights in the Canadian Parliament. Welcome, Mr. Kotler. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's meeting of the Subcommittee on International Human Rights is a special briefing on allegations of forced harvesting and trafficking of organs in China. This is not a new topic for this committee, having heard about it in previous parliaments, but we look forward to an update here today. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. The Honourable David Kilgour, a former MP, Minister of State and colleague here, and an occupant of this particular subcommittee chair in past parliaments, and David Mattis, also a lawyer and human rights activist, will be joining him to testify here today. Both witnesses have spent 10 years working on this subject, testifying before numerous legislative bodies and committees, including on several occasions this subcommittee, and they have released multiple reports on organ harvesting, the most recent updates being released earlier this year. I want to welcome both you gentlemen to this subcommittee, and I'd like to invite our witnesses to begin with their opening statements, and from there we can move on to questioning. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et je vous...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank all my colleagues for inviting me here today with you. I think that I will be giving my speech in French, but...
Join us, and all of you said yes. Sorry, I wasn't able to ask you, but he refused to come. So can you cite him for contempt or something, Mr. Chair? No, this is a very unfunny topic, so forgive me for trying to bring in a bit of humor. It's, as I guess you alluded to, Mr. Chair, the two of us were asked by the coalition to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong in 2006, a long time ago, as volunteers to look into some seemingly preposterous allegations that were coming out of China about Falun Gong. We did two reports. The third one was a book published in 2009 called Bloody Harvest. I hope you have the book. I think we could get you one, Mr. Chair, if you don't. And I've put my glasses on. We concluded that for 41,500 transplants done in the years 2000 to 2005 alone, the only plausible explanation for sourcing was Falun Gong. I'll ask my colleague David Mattis can perhaps tell you more about Falun Gong. I'm just trying to skim through this by giving you some of the presumed highlights. Here are 3 of the 32 kinds of evidence we found that this was happening. Investigators made calls to many hospitals and detention centers across China, claiming to be relatives of patients, and we discovered that in about 15 facilities across China, they had Falun Gong organs for transplant available. A number of Falun Gong practitioners who later got out of China told us that they were systematically blood tested in the forced labor camps, and we knew this couldn't be for their health because they were being tortured and worked, as I'll mention in a few minutes, under hideous conditions. We interviewed the ex-wife of a surgeon from Sujiatan, China, and he had told his wife, I know that in the courts in Canada, the lawyers here would know that that's hearsay evidence, but I still think it's persuasive. He told her that he had removed the corneas from 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners during a 2-year period. 2001 to 2003. He also told her that none of the donors, in quotation marks, survived because the surgeons removed other organs and their bodies were then burned. Unfortunately, Ethan Gutman can't be with us today. He wrote the book called The Slaughter, which he spent 7 years researching and writing. He looked at the Falun Gong, Tibetan, Uyghur, and House Christian communities, and he concluded, or his best estimate was that the organs of about 60 to 65,000 Falun Gong and 2,000 to 4,000 Uyghur, Tibetans, and House Christians were harvested in the 2000-2008 period. There's been the recent output update on our books, which came out in June of this year. It was launched actually in Washington, Brussels, and in Ottawa. It provides an exhaustive examination of hundreds of hospitals in China, looks at records, looks at websites, looks at beds available, a whole bunch of things, and we concluded that an industrial scale organ harvesting is going on across China. We conclude that a minimum of 60,000 transplants a year are being done across the country. As you probably all know, the government of China claims they're doing about 10,000. We provide a lot of evidence, 740 pages, depending on the size of the font, and 2,400 footnotes to document what we call a state-directed transplant network, controlled through national policies, funding, and implicating both the military and the civilian healthcare systems. Our update has a number of conclusions, but I'll just give you four perhaps. David Matus will talk about the others. First of all, organ pillaging in China is a crime in which the Communist Party, state institutions, the health system, hospitals, and the transplant professions are all complicit. The global intergovernmental community should establish an institution-based independent investigation into organ transplant abuse in China. Perhaps the government of Canada could do it. We are well placed to do that. And I think all of us who've worked on this are convinced you'd come to the same conclusions that we've come to. Organ tourism to China should not be shielded by medical confidentiality, but openly monitored. We also think that Canada should enact laws that would ban Canadians from going to China for organs, as Israel, Spain, and Taiwan have now done. No nation, including of course ours, should allow our citizens to go for organs until China has stopped killing their own prisoners of conscience for their organs. So what can the Parliament of Canada, what can the Government of Canada do? In early 2015, this committee, and I have the highest respect for this committee, I think you probably all know what the motion you passed expressing concern and so on, and you encouraged the medical professionals to do something about this. You called on medical and scientific regulatory bodies to name and shame and ostracize individuals involved in this hideous practice. You called on the Government of Canada to consider ways to discourage and prevent Canadians from taking part in transplant tourism. Now, DAFO, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize this year and has professionals across the world who are against forced organ transplants, have put out a number of documents, including a press statement, which I won't talk about because of time. But one point they made in their press conference is that, as they said, China is not ready to join the ethical values-based world transplant community as an equal, trusted partner. In order to take the Chinese government's claims seriously, monitoring groups and ethical organizations should demand full disclosure of the use of prisoners of conscience as organ sources, transparency of organ sources, and access to China's organ procurement pathways. A word about forced labor camps. Now, people will tell you that they don't exist anymore, and I certainly hope they don't. They've been renamed. They were called detoxification centers for a while, but I'm very much afraid that these camps exist across China still. One estimate we've got is about 350 of these camps across China. And you may not know that you can be sent to one of these camps on a police signature only. There's no appeal, there's no hearing. The policeman can send you there for up to 3 years, and you work 16 hours a day for no pay, of course, and very bad conditions. And we've been told by people who got out of these camps and out of China that they make things like Christmas decorations, McDonald's toys, we've been told, and all manner of other things for use by multinational companies outside of China. Two of the people that you can see their photos, those of you who have copies of this, Charles Lee. Charles Lee was actually an American, and when he got out of this camp after, I think it was 3 years, thanks to pressure from the U.S. Congress, he went back to New Jersey and he found he was making, what's his name, Simpson's slippers in this camp, and he was able to buy one of these slippers in a store near his house. Jennifer Zhang on the right there, by the way, does everyone have a copy of this? Some of you maybe don't. Everyone does have? Has been, okay. She and Lee were both in a movie that's called Free China, which talked about their experiences in these camps, and as you can imagine, they are hideous. So, in conclusion, I'd like to refer to Dr. Jay Lavie, he just retired as a member of the Transplantation Society Ethics Committee, and he was a key figure in reforming Israel's legislation about transplants. Israel used to send people, the insurance companies would pay their costs to go to China, pay for the organs, and then one day Dr. Lavie discovered that one of his heart patients was going to get a heart, and I think it was 2 weeks later, and then he realized what was going on, and to his enormous credit, he got Israel to stop this process and basically made it an offense to be a broker to go to China for organs. He gave an interview just before the transplantation conference in Hong Kong a few months ago, and he said to, which is quoted in the piece you have, New York Times reporter Didi Kirsten Tatlow, quote, "I'm a simple Jewish heart transplant surgeon and the son of a Holocaust survivor. And the reason I spend so much time on this is that I can't keep silent in the face of a new crime against humanity," close quote. I just cite one other person, Professor Maria Fattaroni Singh of the Sydney University Medical School. And she says, quote, "Individuals who are not free to consent can never be used as organ donors, as this not only prevents them from achieving their human potential, it completely dehumanizes them and should be thus unacceptable to any society in the 21st century. So finally, DAFO recently put out a response to a conference that was held in Beijing a few months ago where about supposed reforms in China's transplant system, and they put out a longer statement, but let me just quote to you a little bit from their press release, which is also, I believe, attached to your statement. Quote, "There have been extensive Chinese media coverage of a recent Beijing conference on Chinese organ donation processes. I have to put on my glasses again. The conference was reportedly held with the support of the China National Organ Donation and Transplant Committee, the International Society for Organ Donation and Procurement, the Transplantation Society. You may not know, that's a very large organization that represents all of the transplant surgeons around the world, and they were the ones who had the meeting in Hong Kong that David and I both were at as well, and the World Health Organization. Various eminent international doctors involved in the conference allegedly made statements in praise of China's reforms. Despite the rhetoric, there is no evidence that China now sources organs for transplantation in an ethical or transparent way." And then this paragraph, "Serious concerns remain. First, there is no actual law prohibiting the use of organs from executed prisoners. The widely proclaimed ban is nothing more than an announcement reported in the media. Second, the semantic trick of reclassifying executed prisoners' donations as voluntary citizen donations makes it impossible to identify the true source of organs within the allegedly voluntary system." So the last, for my statement, is this final paragraph in the press release. "Finally, it's difficult to see this event as anything more than another propaganda event designed to distract attention from actual practices in China. The onus is on those who would champion China's reforms to demand accurate, auditable data, independent access to practitioners and relatives, unscheduled visits to hospitals, including military hospitals, and open access to financial records regarding transplantation." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very much, Mr. Kilgore. And Mr. Matus, if you're ready, you please deliver your statement as well.
Yes, thank you for inviting us both. Let me start off by saying a bit about Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a set of exercises with a spiritual foundation, a Chinese equivalent of yoga. It began in 1992 with the teachings of Li Hongzhi, and was initially promoted by the government of China as beneficial to health. It grew to 70 to 100 million practitioners by 1999 by the government's own estimates. The Communist Party then decided to ban the practice. The reasons were, first, the large number of practitioners. Second, Falun Gong is not political, but it's also not communist. Third, Falun Gong is spiritual and the Communist Party is atheist. Fourth, Falun Gong is not an organization, but through cell phones and internet, it has a mobilizing capacity. The party began a propaganda and repression campaign against Falun Gong. Practitioners of Falun Gong were arrested in the hundreds of thousands. Those who recanted were released. Those who did not recant were tortured. Those who did not recant after torture were held in indefinite arbitrary detention. Parallel with the growth of Falun Gong, China developed an organ transplant industry. The first sources of organs for transplants were prisoners sentenced to death and then executed. A second source of organs were prisoners of conscience. The earliest of these were Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. A third parallel development was the shift from socialism to capitalism. The shift meant that the government of China withdrew funding from many public services, including the health sector, and expected these services to raise funding privately. This combination of events, the vilification and mass detention of Falun Gong, the sourcing of organs from prisoners, and the need for hospitals for funding led, with other factors, to the mass killing of Falun Gong for their organs. Falun Gong practitioners in prison became a ready, inexhaustible source of organs which could be sold to transplant tourists at exorbitant prices. The fact that this was happening became readily apparent, and we heard from David Kilgore a number of the evidentiary factors that show that this was happening. The official Chinese explanation for sourcing at that time was donations, but China didn't have a donation system nor an organ distribution system. China then switched this explanation to say that all organs were coming from prisoners sentenced to death and then executed. But prisoners sentenced to death by law had to be executed within 7 days of sentence. There's a high rate of hepatitis B in the criminally detained population, making many criminal prisoner organs unusable. The absence of any organ distribution system, the need for blood type, size, and ideally tissue type compatibility meant that the claim of sourcing from death penalty prisoners for the high volume of transplants was implausible. China has now switched back to saying all organs are coming from donations. And they have set up donation centers, but the donation centers, according to our own investigations, are producing tiny, statistically insignificant numbers. China's also set up a purchase and sale system, which it calls donations, buying organs from poor relatives of patients near death in hospitals. This purchase and sale system is likely generating numbers to compensate for the fall in the death penalty, but no more. Chinese statistics are propaganda by other means. We originally accepted the Chinese official volume of 10,000 a year, David Kilgore and I, and Ethan Gutman, and tried to figure out where the 10,000 was coming from. The Chinese, as far as we can tell, produced that 10,000 figure as a form of boasting to show how advanced they were in transplant technology. They realized belatedly they had no explanation for the 10,000, so even though transplant volumes grew considerably since they first generated the 10,000 volume, they stayed with the 10,000 figure. With our latest update, we decided to look beyond the official statistics and make our own calculations. And again, we heard from David Kilgore on that. And there is a lot of detail on that, and I certainly invite you to look at it. But you can see very easily that our high figures have to be right. The Chinese government, after we came out with our report, set up a registration for hospitals. There was originally 1,000 hospitals doing transplants, 800 applied for registration. They registered 146 liver and kidney, 23 heart and lung. They had minimum bed requirements and minimum staff requirements for this registration. If we look just at liver and kidney, and if we look at only the minimum bed requirements and assume a length of stay which is substantially beyond the average stay for transplant patients in hospitals, and assume 100% capacity, because there is this tremendous demand, we get a figure of over 60,000 transplants a year in China, 69,300. That's at the minimums. If we look at the staff at the hospitals, and if we assume that there's, for these hospitals, they have only one transplant team, and many of them have more, and they're each working, just working days, we get almost 54,000 transplants a year. So, or look at just a couple of hospitals. The Shenzhen Hospital, according to their statistics, are producing 8,000 transplants a year. Beijing number 309, 4,000 transplants a year. So just a couple hospitals get us beyond the 10,000 figure. Again, we've heard from David Kilgore on recommendations about what should be done, and of course, I support them all. I welcome the fact that this committee has already passed a resolution, motion on this subject, which was a good one. I would say that there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of willingness, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of awareness of this problem in Canada, but I think we have to move beyond that and do something practical to combat this vice. And the recommendations that David Kilgore, you've already heard from, I think really need to be acted on, and that's what I would say. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matus. So we will now move on to the questioning, the questions, and I believe that MP Anderson, you're first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses. It's also good to see Mr. Kotler back here again. This is an old home of his. I want to ask you, in December 2014, and Mr. Kilgore referenced this, the Chinese government declared that after the beginning of January of 2015 that they would stop using executed prisoners' organs and it would go to a voluntary system from citizens. Is your assessment that they don't have the ability or willingness to do that?
Indeed, yes. Indeed, and in fact, if you want to have some interesting reading, David Matus has written a report on Jiang Jiafu, who speaks for the Wang Jiafu speaks for them on these issues, and David has traced his contradictions and his what's the polite word of saying, his inexactitudes, is that which there are many, and I think you are almost laughing by the time you finish reading his piece, because he just contradicts himself, says anything to anybody that protects the medical regime in China and the government of China.
Okay, so I want to just take a couple of minutes here. Don't have a lot of time, but can you lay
sure.
out
Go ahead.
who is...
I wonder if I could just add to that, because I mean, that was sort of an interesting question. The willingness, obviously not, but the question is whether they have the ability. And I'm not so sure in the current situation they're even able to do so, because they become so dependent on the sourcing of organs. And there's so many people complicit in this abuse now that it's simply, in the current system, it's almost impossible to unravel.
Okay, so you're talking about so many people complicit. I wonder, can you just give us a bit of a breakdown of what is the involvement of national and local private interests? You know, what role do local medical authorities play in this? Is there a structure to this that starts somewhere, and what are the levels of responsibility that come in at different areas?
Well, in terms of persecution of Falun Gong, that's the Central Committee of the Communist Party. I mean, that was decided at a meeting in June 1999. In terms of killing Falun Gong, that was decided at a party gathering of the 610 office, which was set up to persecute the Falun Gong in November 1999. Because organ sourcing from prisoners had started before the persecution of Falun Gong, the system of organ distributions was run through the prisons and the courts, originally because they were dealing with death penalty prisoners. So it's all institutionally geared. The party also has these 5-year plans where they've given a high priority to the development of the organ transplantation industry. You can see that, I mean, it's not just that it's there, but it's growing. It's been growing throughout this whole period. They've been building hospitals or wings of hospitals dealing only with transplants, so that this is institutionalized. This is not corruption. This is not profit-seeking. This is not criminalization. This is a state-run, directed industry.
I can give you 610, by the way, comes from June the 10th, and that's why they call it the 610 office. It's all over China. There's an office in there's an office in Hong Kong actually too, which we encountered when we were there. They were trying to disrupt our meeting, and I can maybe drive it home with an example. I met and we've been in, by the way, we've been in about 50 countries now talking about this, and in I guess it was in Melbourne. I ran into a former policeman in China, who told me that he'd worked for 610, and that if, as David mentioned, if somebody was being forced to give up their Falun Gong beliefs, he told me that the police were authorized to shoot the person if they thought they might go back to being Falun Gong practitioner. That gives you a sense of how totalitarian, how corrupt, and how appalling this whole system is. And it's hard for us as Canadians, anybody, to understand how this 610 office works, but it's in every university, city, village, business. It's throughout the country, and it was started by Jiang Zemin, who came out of the party headquarters in Beijing and saw there were, as David mentioned, about 10,000 people protesting, and he could see people from the party, people from the army, diplomats, academics. It was right across all walks of life. And he went back in and he wrote a letter saying that, it was a ridiculous letter saying, who's going to prevail, Falun Gong or the Communist Party? And since that day, basically, the war has been going on against Falun Gong. And as I'm happy to tell you that I don't think either of us have ever seen a case where a Falun Gong practitioner responded with violence to the incredible violence that they suffer 24/7. And of course, the demonization that goes on in the media 24/7. One more little tiny anecdote. A friend of mine went to Tiananmen Square a couple of years ago with her mother. They were looking around and they had a guide, and the guide, somehow Falun Gong came up, and the guide said, "Oh, Falun Gong, they eat their children." That's the level of demonization, and as David has written about the Holocaust, said, genocides don't start with acts, they start with words.
Okay. I'm running out of time here quickly. So one detour. Are there any other countries that you are concerned about? You're the experts on this. Are there other countries that are concerning you right now on this issue as well?
Right.
I mean, we're not an NGO. I mean, we're individuals, and we have been focusing only on China, and within China, only on organ transplant abuse, and within organ transplant abuse, only on Falun Gong. I mean, Ethan Gutman has said, well, it's also Uyghurs and Tibetans and House Christians, and we've read his research and we agree with it, but it's not our own. There is organ transplant abuse in other countries, of course, but it's different from China because the organ transplant abuse in other countries is underground, it's black market, it's criminal, it's not state-run.
Okay, so probably one last question, but market conditions exist. Often demand or supply reflects demand. What should the Canadian government be doing to interfere, or if you want to call it interfere, or limit tourism, transplant tourism?
Very good question. We are strongly in favor, as all of you are, I'm sure, in encouraging voluntary donations. What Israel did when they stopped going to China, they said if someone signed a card giving a donation, they would have priority for donations if they needed them. So that, I mean, there are all kinds of things we should do. You probably know that Spain is the most successful country in Europe in encouraging people to give organs. And Canada, I wish we could do all of them. But you're absolutely right. We're strongly in favor of encouraging people to give organs voluntarily.
Thank you very much. The next question is going to be MP Miller.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. I'm interested in the numbers in and of themselves, and far be it for me to question them. It's just the multipliers that you apply can at times appear to be random, and it isn't just a question of the fact as to whether or not a donation is voluntary or not. Obviously, an involuntary donation, whether it's 1 or 1 million, is unacceptable and should be called out. I'm simply interested in trying to figure out how you can assess the progression, or at least if there is any improvement in the way the Chinese state is behaving, how you can document that if arbitrary numbers and multipliers are applied. Certainly when you see the numbers, you start to scratch your head as to whether it can be accurate. One would indicate a much higher execution rate, for example, if this were the case, than is publicized. And then in other cases, the cause, and David you'd mentioned that it was that it didn't have to do so much as the black market, but attributed to Falun Gong, House Christians, and so forth. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of all this and figure out how you address some of the criticisms that do address numbers and do address black market implementation capacity issues that are often thrown back at you.
Sure. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, first of all, in terms of our update, we haven't really had any criticism of the content of the report. I mean, the government of China has said it's anti-China. But obviously, if we didn't care about China, we wouldn't care about this. The government of China said that the figures must be wrong because their percentage of anti-rejection drugs is the same as their percentage of transplants worldwide. But of course, that doesn't account for transplant tourists, and their statistics about anti-rejection drugs are as hard to fathom as their statistics about transplant volumes. Now, I admittedly use some multipliers in trying to give you a shortcut to figure out where the totals come, but if you actually look at the report, we don't do it that way. What we do is we go hospital by hospital, and we look at the actual numbers at each hospital through their websites, their newsletters, their bed counts, their staff counts, their research grants, their research publications, the media reports. And so it's not saying this is one hospital and we multiply by 146 or 1,000. We do it every single hospital. We just add up the figures. That's why there's 2,400 footnotes. 2,200 of them come from the individual hospitals. And so I'm glad you're not persuaded by the shortcut, because then I invite you to read the whole report. So that's what I would say.
And so the next question is really on the black market and implementation issues that may be thrown back as a sort of a counterweight to say it isn't exclusively addressed at Falun Gong and other religious minorities or practitioners.
Okay, just go with that. We run into this all the time. People say, well, what about somebody who got a kidney in X country? And yes, this happens, and I'm sure you know what happens. You go down and you buy one kidney, hoping you can get your child through university or something. But there's only one country in the world where it's state-run from top to bottom, and that's China. And there may be black market organ transplants in China, but they don't need them because they have a huge system going run by the government, really from top to bottom. One example we sometimes use is that you remember I mentioned the case of the person who removed the 2,000 corneas from the her husband was paid the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars, US dollars, for that during those 2,000 operations. So the doctors are very well paid, and they're not going to talk about it. So it's a whole system that can only exist in a totalitarian government, and we can't stop the government of China from killing its people, unfortunately. Although I honestly believe that naming and shaming has helped. And I do think they're at a tipping point where they're getting so much bad publicity now. There was just a hearing, for example, in Germany yesterday. There's so much bad publicity for them out of this that I think they may stop. But what we can do is we can at least say that it's a small number of Canadians probably who are going to China, but we can at least say that Canadians are not allowed to go. You don't even have to mention China. You cannot go and buy an organ somewhere outside of Canada. And as Taiwan's got the best legislation now, and if Taiwan can do it, being so close to China and having so many people... Oh, you're running out of time.
No, it's fine. I was asking if I could have a couple seconds.
I was wondering about your question of black market. I mean, is that a question that you're suggesting that maybe the numbers come from the black market rather than from official activity?
Correct, or corruption.
Or corruption. Well, as I indicated, there were 800 hospitals that applied for registration, and 169 got registered. As far as we can tell, some of them are still doing transplants. So there is that form of black market. We didn't include that in our calculations because it's harder to get hold of. And there are, the reality is there's, like everywhere else, a much bigger demand for transplants, even in China, than there is supply. Even doing 100,000 transplants a year, they're not exhausting the demand. And they are charging high prices. So there is, in addition to all this official stuff, sure, there's a black market in China, but what that would do is produce figures even beyond what we've produced.
Okay, thank you. And then just final small question. What is your capacity to verify whether there's been any incremental change since December 2014 or the beginning of 2015?
Well, a lot of our statistics, like we did our report starting, I mean, it came out in June of this year, and we started doing it in September of last year. So all of it is subsequent to the changes for the update. We have archived everything we saw, so you can see everything that we saw.
Thank you.
There's a little bit of time left there. I was interested in just asking a little bit about multilateral action and what Canada perhaps can do in the international community with allies. I know there was the Istanbul Declaration back 2008, seems to be the last kind of thing that took place in terms of international activity in this. What are is there other work being done multilaterally? Anything that you can suggest or shed light on?
Can we both have a go at that? Well, yeah, not effectively being done. As you know, China has a veto in the UN, but some of the committees of the UN have done. The UN Committee on Torture, which is a group of non-UN employees, experts have been very helpful. The UN rapporteur on torture has been very helpful in the past, but it's hard to get a multilateral organization like the UN or the European Union has passed a very good resolution, which we are fond of, but not much has been done except in Spain to do something. It seems that when you get a large number of governments involved, this is not an issue that you can. We have one country we know about, which I agreed not to name, that was finding that a lot of other people were going to China for organs, and rather recently they have agreed they will stop this, their people going to China, but we won't name the country, and we'll see how they do in stopping that. But what I guess I'm really saying, and David may have a different view, but we're trying to get countries like Canada, and it's a little embarrassing when these two Canadians have been running all over the world, and you've got Taiwan and Spain and Israel who are really way ahead of us. So it would be very nice if one of you or all of you, or we'd get the government of this new government of Canada to bring in a bill that would simply do what Taiwan has done. If Taiwan can do it, I'm sure that it should be relatively easy for this country to do it on an all-party basis. David may have a completely different answer. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I have a couple of additional. I certainly agree with what he said, but I do have a couple of additional suggestions. One is the Universal Periodic Review, the United Nations Human Rights Council. I've been to both of them since the review has started, when China has been up for consideration. And I've listened to all the statements. Canada distinguished itself, I think, was alone in mentioning the persecution of Falun Gong. And it should continue to do so, but I should also think it should deal with organ transplant abuse directly. And it shouldn't just be persecution of Falun Gong, but persecution of Falun Gong and transplant abuse. Another multilateral body I draw your attention to is the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe has approved and opened for signature a treaty on organ trafficking, which allows non-Council of Europe member states to sign. Canada should sign and ratify that treaty and implement it through legislation. Canada is an observer at the Council of Europe. David Kilgore and I, when we were in Sweden, met with the Swedish parliamentarian that is planning to mobilize the parliamentarians of the Council of Europe to endorse a resolution with an investigation on this issue. Canada, although they can't vote, they can speak at the Council of Europe and should speak and support this initiative. But I would also say, and I second this with David Kilgore, I don't think we have to wait for a multilateral institution to act, and I don't think we have to wait for others to do something before we do something. This is an area where Canada on its own can take some leadership, particularly on the issue of investigation, because the European Union has called for an investigation, hasn't done it. The U.S. House of Representatives has called for an investigation, but that hasn't happened. I, of course, would like the Parliament to call for an investigation, but I would like Canada to do it. Not just the way David and Kilgore and I have done it as civil society, but as a governmental thing.
Thank you. MP Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for the hard work you're doing, and I've been intrigued by your answers, so I think I'll just present a little package, and then you can go ahead and talk for as long as the chair allows you under the time allocation, because it's very intriguing to hear you. I don't know where to start except for to say that those were excellent suggestions with regards to tangible ways that we can tighten up and strengthen the recommendations of this subcommittee. I'll tell you that just reading some of the text and having the updates and the evidence. Mr. Miller did ask about the numbers. I find that an intriguing story that you went to local hospitals to get numbers, and that they are more willing to give you those numbers because they're, I guess, oblivious to the issues that the state's facing, right? So maybe you can riff a little bit on that some more if you want to. Here's the question, and all of us were briefed on some of this. I just want you to hear. The potential to extract organs after the execution of prisoners is a primary factor. Is this a primary factor in the decision to execute prisoners or merely an incidental benefit? So that I think that's the crux of it, and part of our role in the investigation and the international human rights stance, right? So take it away.
Well, the number of executions, thank goodness, in China is starting to go down. But the problem is that as the executions go down, and they have to be done within 7 days, as David mentioned, the demand for organs from prisoners of conscience who have no hearing, no appeal, and nothing. The way it works, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is that if David needs... Sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. He goes to Shanghai and pays a lot of money for an organ, the #1 People's Hospital. They then do the blood tests, tissue tests, and they go out and they find a match for him out in one of these work camps. And the person who unluckily happens to be a match for David Matus is taken in, and their liver is taken out, and the liver is flown to Shanghai in a People's Liberation aircraft. And he is told he's getting a liver from they probably say it's a murderer or something. I don't know why he'd want a problem. But one of the reasons the Falun Gong are so sought after is because they don't smoke or drink. They tend to be very healthy people, often very healthy people. So it's the execution thing is not a... go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of primary or incidental, I would say it depends on the type of prisoner. If it's a prisoner sentenced to death, then it would be incidental. I mean, they're going to be executed anyway. So to a certain extent, that's how the thing started off. It started off as incidental and then became primary, partly because the system had already been set up. It's just a matter of shifting. And the Falun Gong and the other prisoners of conscience, but particularly Falun Gong, were very heavily vilified with this incitement to hatred, which depersonalized them, particularly in the eyes of the people in the state system, the jailers, who tended to buy into this propaganda. The Falun Gong are normally not sentenced to anything. They're certainly not sentenced to death. Some of them are sentenced to disrupting social order and get a 3-year sentence, but a lot of them aren't even sentenced to that. Falun Gong, although it was repressed by Communist Party decision, was never legally officially banned. So you don't violate a law by practicing Falun Gong, you just violate party policy, which of course is above the law. And so when it came to the killing of Falun Gong for their organs, that wasn't incidental, that was primary. I mean, otherwise they would still be alive, and many of them, of course, are still alive. There's a vast forced organ donor bank in arbitrary detention in China.
So how do we investigate that then, if there's no record?
But you can talk to Falun, because there are a lot of Falun Gong practitioners, or not a lot. A number have managed to get out of these camps, out of China, and we've talked to them. There's some of them in Canada. There's some in Toronto, I believe. And so you can talk to them and hear stories that just make you sick. They have family members. That's why you have placards up all over the country and, in fact, over much of the world, because this war against Falun Gong has been going on since really June of 1999 or July of 1999, and it continues. And we call it a new crime against humanity. It's inhuman what's happening to Falun Gong practitioners.
Yeah, I can add to that. First of all, I'd like to say that's a good question. I mean, that's a problem we had to grapple with, because what we start off with is no corpses, bodies cremated, no witnesses, because everything happens in a closed, I mean, it's either perpetrators or victims, no crime scene, and an operating room is cleaned up afterwards, no documents, except official party documents, which are not going to be released to us. So what do we do? Well, how do we look at it? And this was it. And when we started out, I mean, we were asked to investigate this. We weren't given any money, any data, or any direction. And our view was, we don't know. And we didn't want to come to this conclusion. My preference would have been the opposite, that this wasn't happening. But we sort of walked around it, talked to people who got out of prison, out of China. We talked to patients who went into China. We talked to doctors. We looked at hospital websites. We looked at anything that came out of China that we could. I mean, of course, what made it even more difficult is that as we were going through this research, anytime we would cite something from an official Chinese source, it would just disappear. I mean, we would archive everything. I mean, this is a rolling cover-up. I mean, I don't know if David Kilgore likes this example, but I ask myself, what would we know about the Holocaust today if the Nazis had won World War II? I mean, that's the sort of situation we're faced with. And so it's a matter of piecing together what evidence we can. And I will say this, that since we've done that, I mean, you will get denials and rejections from people out of interest, like the Communist Party of China. But nobody who's done the research independently and doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome has contradicted our research or even really questioned it, which is how Ethan Gutman came about his work, and Kirk Allison, and Arnie Schwartz, and Jay Levy, and so on.
Thank you, MP Hardcastle.
I think he's cutting you off.
Oh, no,
sorry. Can I just, like, one little...
Sure.
So what happened in Taiwan? Like, that's kind of shocking that they're the vanguard leaders in this. Who knew, right?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to make fun of you. I used to have your job a long time ago, as you mentioned. You're doing a great job. Yeah, no, Taiwan is a fascinating case because there's a lot of hepatitis in Taiwan, you probably know, and a lot of people from Taiwan, I think, used to go to China. And and the mayor of Taipei right now is Mayor Ko, K-O, and he's a transplant surgeon. And he won in an absolute landslide. It was about a year and a half ago. And he went over to China and made inquiries about where they could get organs in China. And in one hospital, do you remember the name of the city? It's in one city he went to.
It's near Taiwan, but I don't remember the name.
They told him that they had only Falun Gong organs available for transplants. So he came back and gave an interview to Ethan Gutman about this. And Ethan's book came out just in the middle of the election campaign in Taipei. And we were traveling in a car in BC together, and there were phone calls going by every 5 minutes because this was getting to be very embarrassing. And Ethan has a very high opinion of Mayor Ko, and Mayor Ko won in a landslide, 700,000 votes or something. And he's a good guy. Believe me, Mayor Ko is a good guy on this. And if Taiwan can do it with both parties' support, why on earth can't we do it in Canada with all party support, do a similar type measure?
I wonder if I might add to that just a bit. I mean, I think there's a tendency, at least in some quarters, for people to say, oh, we shouldn't confront China because it may be against our economic interests. But I think Taiwan is a good answer to that because they have had at various times a lot of confrontation with China politically, yet economically they have thrived in their relations with China.
Thank you. I see that the time is now just a couple of minutes before the end, so I think I'm going to cut off the questions there. I do want to ask, would it be possible for you to please send a copy of the full updated report to the clerk so that she can disperse it to all the members of this committee and anybody else that's sitting here today that would like it?
It's about that thick. And
digitally, it's not that thick.
Sure. takes a half an hour to download it on a PDF or something, or 20 minutes to, but we of course will do it.
Okay, well, listen, I would like to thank you both for coming and once again bringing our attention to this very, very important issue. I know you were here last year, and I really appreciate you being here today. It's an important issue. I know we've got many interested parties that came to listen to this testimony today. I want to thank them for coming, and again, Professor Kotler, thank you for having you here today as well. Thank you very much. Adjourned.